Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Rock Your Shine After You've Been Cracked Wide Open. Today, I have another special guest with me. I cannot wait for you to hear her tremendous story of persistence, resilience, and just an overall inspiring story of what happens when we believe in ourselves and we don't give up. Today, I have with me Shelly Ferrari, and Shelly, she's a mother of two. She is a grandmother of two, and she is a great grandmother of one great grandchild. Shelly is retired now, but she spent her life as an accountant for a real estate organization. And today, what we're going to be listening to, as I said, is Shelly's story of remarkable resilience and what she did as a very young person who had to raise her children alone. So, Shelly, welcome to the show today.
Thank you.
So let's start from the very beginning because I know I don't want to give all the good stuff away, but I know that where your story really begins from what you and I have talked about is how you were raised to be a wife and not an independent woman. So, and that's exactly what
Sure.
ended up happening in your life. So let's start there. Talk to us about this idea of you being raised to be a wife and a mother.
Exactly. Yes, I knew how to make a bed really well. I knew in what order I should be ironing. I knew how to get into the corners of the floor that were dirty, how to wash a bathroom floor. And that's how I was brought up, obviously, to be someone's wife.
And so who taught you this? Your mother? Is this
Oh,
is
yeah, absolutely my mother, because she wasn't taught anything and she felt it where she was a wife. She felt that it was a big problem for her to not know how to do anything. So she was determined to teach me how to do it all.
and
Yep.
as you were learning how to clean the dirt out of the corners of the floor, did you have other dreams at that time? Did you feel like this isn't what I want to be doing? Or were you just a young, impressionable daughter that you thought this is what women just do? What was going on with you as you were learning how to clean a house?
I think it was a combination of both. I felt like it was not what I wanted, but it was something that I needed to learn and to do. It was restrictive to me, and it had to be. I mean, if I had to do this every Saturday, had to do this. And I was definitely not happy in that situation, wondering if I could ever get out of that situation.
And so, but you went to school, right? Did you complete high school?
Yes, and I went to Northeastern University for a year, but unfortunately didn't pass through my first year. So I ended up going to secretarial school, which she insisted upon. All her children needed to have some career, even though
Hmm.
I was brought up to be, again, a wife. But I did go to secretarial school so I could get a job in an office.
And then when did you meet your husband?
I met him after high school. We both had a summer job in the same place.
Hmm. And so how old were you when you got married?
Oh, I was 20 and a half, 20 and a half when I got married. Yes.
And so this is really where we dive into your story. So let's just go there. So you get married, and did you get married because you felt like you had to, or did you get married because you really were in love with this man?
Oh, no, I was not in love with this man. Unfortunately, I had to get married because he was of the same faith as me, and my mom and dad were just thrilled to death about that. So I just went along with it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so tell us what happens next. You get married, you
Yeah,
have
we have
children.
Yeah, we had a couple of children. I think my second child was conceived because I really thought, like some young people do, that child will create a better marriage. And we all know that doesn't work. But I found that I wasn't happy having to do everything. He was also brought up at that same era that his job was all he did, and he'd come home and just sit down, eat, and then watch TV. And everything else was on me. And I hated it. I hated every minute of it.
So when did things start to change when you felt like you could not continue to go down this path?
It started to change when I started to see behavior in him that was different. not only was he coming home later at night, he was all of a sudden we had a set of headphones and he had them on his head and he was laying on the floor and he was getting into music. And I'm looking at him like, what is this? Didn't realize that he was high and this is what he was doing. After a while, I started to realize that something wasn't right with his mood. I did ask him and he would tell me ridiculous stories that he had stopped for a drink and someone drugged him and crazy things. And I just knew that I would rather do my marriage. No, I would rather do my life without my marriage and work at what I needed to learn than have him there. The type of guy that Sunday morning he waited till time to leave to get dressed while I had to everything, the breakfast, the children. It just was no good that way.
Even
So
and you know, and it's just it's reminding me of people in my life that have left, you know, marriages, because even though this was, you know, many years ago, there are plenty of people that are in these same marriages today, right? I mean, it's a very different world, and in some ways, you know, what you're describing is obviously timeless, right? Drugs, alcohol abuse, those types of things. But what is
yeah,
different is that we've come a long way in terms of the what's available for women, right, in the workforce. I mean, we've come a long, we still have a long way to go, but we've come a long way. And so we have many more options available to us today than you had. And
right.
you had gone to secretarial school. How old are you at this point when you're like, I cannot stay in this marriage anymore? How old are you?
I was 25.
And how old are your
25.
children?
Tracy was 3 and Jackie was 1.
And were you working at this point, or were you a stay-at-home mom?
I was a stay-at-home mom, but I knew this particular weekend he had lied to me about going away on a business trip. I found out that he was not doing that.
How?
And
How did you find out about his lies and about his drug use?
well, the drug use more because he eventually, I knew something was different than someone drugged him. I mean, that was ridiculous. But as far as, yeah, as far as he didn't come home that Sunday until later than what I thought he should be. And I called his boss's family. I don't even know how I had that phone number. And his wife, the man's wife, said to me, my husband didn't go anywhere this weekend. And that was it. So then when my husband called me later in the day, and he always did at the end of the day, asked me if I needed anything, milk, bread. This is his one great quality. And I said, you better get home. Something's going on here. He had no clue. And when he came home, I had all his clothes in green garbage bags in the hallway of this apartment building. And it took a lot of courage because I knew where I was heading. And it was just going to be better without him.
You had to have been terrified. You had no
I,
job. You were
right.
25 years old. As I said, this was a long time ago when we just didn't have the same options available to us as women. And how did your husband respond?
Oh, he was devastated. He wanted to stay. He kept telling me that, it would stop. And I knew it wouldn't because it had been going on for a long time, maybe a year. He was devastated about it. And that was it from that evening. When he came back and all his clothes were out there, he never lived with me again.
That's
Um,
remarkable. I literally find this remarkable, the amount of courage. It takes courage if you do have a job to
yeah, it
raise
was
two children
scary.
alone, to work full time. I mean, you had babies,
Yeah,
a 1 and a 3-year-old.
yeah.
And you were 25. I mean, you were practically
I,
you were so young yourself.
I was the baby too. Yeah.
Yes. So
Well,
what happens now? You kick him out. Is he gonna give you child support? Does he give you any money? Like, what happens after you tell him to leave?
well, no money. That was definite. No money at all. He ended up, I remember correctly, he ended up losing his job, which was right at the beginning of computer stuff. So he really missed out and he started to do acid in work and they found out all of this and they fired him. And in the meantime, my mom I went on welfare. I don't know what it was called then, but I just called it welfare. And that helped. They sent me to the early childhood classes. So that helped considerably. Shopping, I think I started to mention my mom would buy all the meat and I would buy everything else. But I was free. I could feel the freedom. So I did that. I went to school, finished all with welfare.
And where are your children? Who's babysitting your kids while you're doing all of these things?
Well, they could go because I was going to that early childhood education classes.
The
They
kids had
could go,
daycare.
they could go to the daycare. That was, believe me, a planned situation. They
Wow.
could go to the daycare at no charge. So
Wow.
that worked perfectly for me. Um, and after a while, when I got the 2-year degree and the certification, then I went to work for the same daycare that I was trained. So they still could be there. And that was just awesome. Uh, but after a while, I couldn't afford to live on it. It wasn't enough money. And I stopped getting welfare because I didn't thought I didn't need it. And I just went on food stamps. I thought that and I thought, which it did, but I was still getting up courage and the strength to just keep on plugging away, just keep on going. So that's what I did. I ended up leaving there, going into bookkeeping, made more money, and eventually, believe it or not, I actually bought a house on my own. And all of that came from me being so I was so dedicated to being the breadwinner. And I liked it. Not that I didn't have issues with my children. What do I do with them or daycare? I just knew that I was free and I could be on my own, and I ended up having 2 jobs when they were a little bit older, probably in their early teens. I had 2 jobs in order to give them what they needed as part of a group. They needed those sneakers, they needed all that stuff. And I just kept on going. It's one thing my mom taught me: don't look back, just keep going forward. And
That's
I
so
did.
funny. That's exactly what my guest said yesterday. One foot in front of the other. Don't look back, just keep going forward. I have a question before we move on, because there are people who have deep spiritual beliefs, religious beliefs, atheists. Did you, as this young person, were you grown up in faith? Like, because I do believe that source, spirit, God, whatever language you want to use, really does provide for us when we are listening to that deeper calling of our heart, our intuition, our true north, etc. Like, you made a decision, you knew that you needed to leave that marriage. You could have stayed in it out of fear. Your life would have gone in a different direction, and
Absolutely.
yet you chose. What was did you have any beliefs at that time beyond like the physical world, or did you just have a deep knowing that I'm just doing this, and you really were living in the moment, not having a single clue what was going to happen yet? Talk to me about this courage that you had at 25. I'm still,
Yeah.
you know,
We were brought up in a religion, and I did what I was supposed to do when I was home with my parents. When I was around that age, also, I started to look into other religions, and I just wanted to fit somewhere. And I felt that I fit nowhere. And at that time, I think I became an atheist. I do today follow the traditions of my faith, but I still feel like an atheist. I think the courage and everything came from me. I don't believe in that higher power, and I think I was determined, and I gave myself the pat on the back, even though every step scared me. Every single step. When I bought that house, I mean, I had a boss who helped me by giving me his lawyer for free, no charge. I had people helping me all over the place. And I think that they were helping me because I was determined to go somewhere. So I don't think it was a religious experience for me at all.
It's interesting. I always pull from my Oracle Wisdom cards before I start the podcast. And the card that I pulled for you today and it's never surprising. It's always spot on. It's called deep knowing, and I call it our intuition. I call it, for me, it is our higher selves. I call it the soul. But that deep knowing, when you know, you just know. And that's what this feels like to me, that we make, when we truly listen to that deeper knowing, sometimes it's so fleeting that we can't hear it, or we don't listen because our mind, our logical mind, gets involved. And there is a moment in time where we know, we feel it, we know it's the right move, but everything around us might say, don't do it, don't do it, it's not a good move. So, for example, everyone around you may have said, are you crazy? You can't leave a marriage. You've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. You don't even make any money. What are you thinking? Why would you ever do this? And you listened to a deeper knowing inside of you that gave you the courage to take that next step. You didn't have to know the 10 next steps. You only had to know the next step, which is, I'm packing up his things, I'm putting it in these trash bags, and I'm kicking him out. I'll worry about the next step of how I'm going to feed my children
Yeah.
tomorrow. Does that sound accurate to
Oh,
you?
yes, yes, it does. It's very accurate because I know I was scared to death. I remember that feeling. And I remember as I'm putting his clothing in the hallway, thinking to myself, what in all hell am I doing? I shouldn't be doing this. At least he's supporting us. What should I? But I went ahead anyway, did it
Yes,
anyway.
you did it anyway. And I have chills there, listeners. Listen up, because you know the card I pulled. There are always people out there that need to know, what are you on the fence about? Right? That's the question. What are you on the fence about? When our logical mind takes over, as I said, it's a split. You could have stayed. You could have stayed another 10 years.
Mhm.
But at
I could.
20, 25 years old, okay, so now take us on your journey. You've got the deep knowing, you've gone back for early childhood degree. Tell us, bring us along that path of what your how your life unfolds. Because I know that when we had talked prior, that there were times where you really didn't know, right, where you were going to get the money, what you were going to do next. So
Right.
talk to us about that.
Well, as the kids grew, I ended up everything seemed to. When I look back on it, everything seemed to have uh, a second reason why I did something. When the children were old enough to go to school in Boston, I had them bused, which not everyone did in this area. And the reason I had them bused was because I found that the schools that they were being bused to were considered magnet schools. So they were the better schools because of them trying to equal the segregation that might have been going on here. So not only that, they had to be bused home, which means they were only going to be home alone for an hour rather than get out of school at 2:30 and then what do I do? So that was a twofold thought. I did that, made sure that I got to their shows and their productions. I had bosses who said, sure, take it as your lunch hour. I did that. And then I started to find that people had a lot more faith in me than I had in me. When
So,
I went,
this is really important, because I think that this is often true, that before we start believing in ourselves, sometimes we have the courage to take steps because we've got cheerleaders, whether it's our parents, our friends, a boss, people who believe in us more than we believe in ourselves. It's kind of like fake it till you make it, right? I mean, a lot of us have imposter syndrome when we first enter, our first professional job, things like that. So when you say that people believed in you more than you, what do you mean by that? Who believed in you, and how did you know they believed in you?
well, one good thing was that the CFO of the company I was working for at that time offered to pay for school if I went back to school, which I'm sure I asked about, night school, and I went to Bentley. So I didn't pay for Bentley, they did. And as long as I kept my marks up, which I made sure I did because I only took one course per semester because I knew I wanted to get them to pay. So if I took more than one, I was afraid I wouldn't pass. And then I would lose that option. So I took one, maybe two, and I ended up going through most of Bentley. Unfortunately, they closed and my Bentley stipend ended. But
How far along were you on that bachelor's degree?
in my senior year, yeah, in
Oh,
my senior year, and I've never been able to go back. I don't have that kind of money, and I've done okay without it. So I was okay. But
this is when you were doing, so this is when you were doing the bookkeeping, right? You were getting a 4-year degree, but you still became a bookkeeper for a real estate agency,
I was a staff accountant for the real estate
staff
agency.
accountant.
Yes, they're the ones that did not. It was a middle job, an IT job, sort of, where they manufactured motherboards and stuff. They're the ones that, because I was an office manager and all this stuff, and they sent me to school.
That's
So,
amazing.
the realty job came way after.
Okay, so talk to us about Bentley.
I loved it there. Here I was, old, older. I mean, I was in my 40s at least, and I was in school, and I liked being in school, and I liked the whole atmosphere, and I liked learning, and I liked it a lot. And they paid. I remember I used to take either one class or two easy classes because they were going to pay only if I maintained a certain grade. And I was afraid that I would not be able to do more if I was working all day and the children and everything. So I limited my courses, and I did well. And then unfortunately the company went under, and that was the end of Bentley.
And that was your
Um,
senior year, you said you weren't able to
yeah,
finish. So
yeah,
what happened then? But you still, as you said, you were hired for a real estate company as their accountant. Is that Was that after this company folded and you didn't finish Bentley? Was that the next place you went? So you
fortunately,
still, what'd you say? Fortunately?
Fortunately, I had a relative who worked for a, like Indeed, a company that sent me to many interviews. My aunt worked there, so I had some very good interviews and got hired for a real estate company.
And that's where you stayed for, was that, wow.
15 years, yeah, long time.
And
And I
did you ever remarry?
Yes, I can't even go there,
No.
unfortunately. No, that was worse. I seem to have a problem picking good men, so that was worse. And I'm not, it created a really, really big mess in my life, but we were all able to survive. And my kids are doing well. My younger daughter is doing extremely well. My first daughter is doing well. And she has a daughter who goes to Howard, has a GPA of 4.0. I mean, everything has gone well since kicking him out with those bags. Uh, yeah,
So you kicked out both men. You kicked out two men.
yeah, the second one was not good. He was having affairs in my house, so we
Wow.
won't deal with that. But
How long were you married the second time?
10 years.
10 years. Okay. So tell me about you and your daughters. I mean, now that they're all grown, they've got children of their own. Have you guys ever talked about, just what am I trying to ask here? Your daughters must have learned so much by your modeling for them, that role modeling of you as a strong, independent woman at a time where it was so scary for women to go lead an independent life. It is still today.
Mhm.
Have your daughters ever talked to you about that or
Absolutely. It
talked to
seems like it seems like it's written. It has been written on a Mother's Day card every year since my daughters are in their 50s. So
you?
it's been written in Mother's Day cards ever since they were in their 20s, late 20s, 30s, about what they learned from me, what I learned from my mom. But yeah, they've both done well. My older daughter, to be honest, had a little bit of problem dealing with a strong woman as a mother.
Yeah.
Rather than in the beginning, rather than following my lead, she backed off from my lead because she, in her mind, couldn't be as strong as I was. So it was easier to just not try.
Yeah.
That changed over the years. I mean, she's older now. Over the years, after her drug use. We set up budgets. I had bank accounts set up for her so her money would go automatically. And over the years, she just picked that up on her own. And now she's got the strength that she swore she would never have.
Not wonderful. That's such a
It is.
beautiful story.
It is. And her daughter is the one I mentioned earlier who goes to Howard and
Wow.
has a 4.0 and she's a senior.
Wow.
Yeah, it just has turned out. And my younger daughter, Jackie, she went to school, thought that after 2 years that her degree showed that she was nothing more than a glorified secretary, went back to school, and now is a software engineer, which she did also when she had a child, and now is very successful. So, yay! Yay, right.
I know you just give it up for the women. Like my mother, I felt like my mother, she had five of us and she's gone now. And I always say my mother taught me how to love. I think it is because of her. I became a therapist because my mother, my dad died when I was 10 months old and she had three of us.
Oh,
And then she got remarried and had two more children. And so I feel like, and my mom, like she at one point, even if she wanted to leave, I don't think my mother ever felt like she actually could leave. And so, but she taught me because I had four brothers, but what my mother really taught me was that same thing, that deep knowing, just that deep knowing, that intuition. My mother had this crazy intuition and she taught me how to trust that. And so in my own life, I've done a lot of crazy things in my life, just like made these decisions based on this knowing, even when, like everything around me might say, "Are you insane? Why are you going back to school again?" Or whatever it might be. And it is that taking that moment to listen to our true north, right? Because the chatter in our head and the chatter in the world can drown that deeper knowing out. And we take these, what's the word? We get off our path, if you will, right? And so sometimes it's a long road to get us back to that true knowing. And sometimes it is just people who just listen. Every single step they take, they just keep listening for the next right move for them. There is no right or wrong. It's just we all follow our own path. But it feels like to me that from a very young age, you really listened to that deeper voice and you just kept making you'd follow the breadcrumbs.
mhm. Yes. I do have to explain though one thing. Even though my mom was very into don't look back or forward, she was not with me on any of my decisions. She was not with me when I decided to leave him, throw away the garbage bags. She was not with me when I bought my house. She was very much afraid of what she thought I should be afraid of. I wasn't, and she was.
Well,
So
but that's the power of that deeper knowing. That's what I mean. That
it's
when we have to listen to our deeper knowing, oftentimes the people around us are like, "What are you doing?" Because they get very afraid. And when we listen and really attend to it, we can drown out and not get roped into other people's fears that influence these decisions in our life that have a profound impact. And so that's exactly what I'm talking about, that you listen to that deeper knowing. If you listen to the other voices around you and the fear, you could have stayed in that marriage for the rest of your life,
that's
right?
right.
Or for a lot longer than you did.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. I had other backup. So my other backup is what really, that support helped me tremendously. Even when I bought the house, I had friends who were contractors who told me they would help me if I needed a plumbing work because I said, I'm buying a house. How can I buy a house? I can't fix anything. No, they offered to help when I needed it, and that was all I needed.
And thank you for this, because this was the other part of this, of listening to our inner guidance, is that we will I know some people don't believe this. I believe in it wholeheartedly that we have what I call our spirit guides, that we have help, and that when we choose the voice of our deeper knowing, help does show up. As it did for you. You have numerous examples of that.
Yeah,
When you didn't know how you were going to eat, you didn't know how you were going to get groceries. You get sent off to school and it's paid for. You buy a house and you don't know how to do anything, and you have people saying, "I'll come help you anytime you need it."
yeah.
Those, call them angels, call them earth angels. They show up for us and help us when we listen to the calling of our heart. And I know I say listen to the calling of your heart. I say it all the time. I am a deep believer of that. But in order to do that, we have to get clear. And to get clear, we have to get quiet, really quiet. Let me ask you this, because you don't strike me as someone who goes into deep meditation on a daily basis, right? You had stuff to do, you had children to raise. What did that deep knowing look like for you? What did it sound like for you? How did you get in touch with that voice inside of you that said, leave your marriage, buy this house, go back to school, whatever it was in your life path?
I, I don't know exactly what was in my mind. I knew that I wanted to go forward. I knew that if I had this opportunity to buy a house, and I was renting in that house, the owners gave me a great deal. And I knew, I mean, again, you say the people who are your earth angels, if they didn't give me the great deal, I couldn't have bought the house. If my boss didn't give me his lawyer for free, I couldn't have done the legal part of the house. So it seemed
But you
like,
didn't have to say yes to the house. You could have been like, I don't want to strap myself with this kind of a responsibility. I don't know how to take care of this house, but you had to say yes to it. We're offered opportunities all the time that we turn down or we say yes to. Where did this courage come from to say yes to these things?
I don't know. I mean, I remember my boss's wife, I had six at the time.
You had
Who was
what?
going to let me? Six cats, six. And who was going to rent an apartment to me with six cats? So my boss's wife one day said to me, all you can do is try to buy the house. If you don't have enough going on, you won't get it. And that was all I needed to go. Phew. So I did it. It was people supporting my idea that I want to do this, and people showing me the ways that it could be done. Don't give up. And even though I don't remember anything specific saying you're going to do this, pushing me, it just was, it was there. It was just always there. So I had the opportunity and I knew this person was right. Might as well try. When I got the house, I think I was more surprised than anyone. But yeah, but it's just always just sort of been there inside. I never wanted to settle. I don't think I ever wanted to be a housewife, and I never wanted to settle to not accomplish something. And it was very important to me to make people proud, myself, my family, my mother.
Where's your
And
father? Where was your father in all of this? You haven't mentioned him.
my father was there, but not there. It was like being a fatherless child with a father who lived in the house. So he was there. My mother was definitely the core of all of it. And so he was there, and he didn't, he just wasn't involved, you
He
know.
just wasn't engaged.
No,
How many, what did you have? How many siblings did you have?
two sisters.
Are they younger, older? Where are you in
I'm
that
the
lineup?
oldest. I'm the oldest, and my next sister is 4 years younger than me, and the last one is 11 years younger than me, my last
Wow.
sister. So, and it's funny because it's got to be somewhere inside. My younger sister and I have that drive more than the middle sister. And I'm not sure really where that drive comes from. It had to come from inside me because that's me, my
Yes.
personality.
Hmm.
It just had to. I remember joining the NAACP when I was 15, and my mom going, "You went where? You did what?" And it wasn't the thing to do at that age, but I did it because I wanted to, and I knew it was right, and I went. So it's just always been a part of me to just try it out. Why not?
I think I would put even deeper language of the language that we've been using around knowing it was it you learn to listen at a very young age, and that's huge because I think that we waste a lot of time not listening, right? Because we all have an inner guidance. We truly do. And we can save time. Or I should say, we could save some suffering, right? Because we prolong our own suffering when we delay decisions that deep down we know we need to make. I mean,
That's
the
right.
best example of that is those of us who stay in relationships long past their expiration date.
That's
It's not
right.
we can't really make mistakes. They're just experiences and we learn from them, right? I mean, this is
Right.
not a judgment thing. It's just there's just a quicker route, there's a quicker route when we can tap into that
I think I
to our
always had
compass.
more faith in myself because I remember saying to my mom again with my marriage that I just had to do that. There was no ifs. It had to be. He had to go. It's like I had sort of faith in me of having to improve myself. But people questioned, why didn't I stay in this marriage? What are you going to do? You don't even have a car. What are you going to do? You know, but it all worked out because of my own strength. And, talking with you and reliving these things has sort of shown me the strength I've always had that I didn't realize was prevalent all the time. I didn't realize that until I'm repeating it to somebody,
Yeah,
which is awesome, just awesome.
it's awesome. And now look at you. So tell us about where you are now in your life. You're retired. You're at this center. What do you do at the center, at the senior center? What do you do there?
Well, I volunteer. I'm the receptionist on Monday. I found a lot of friends here, a lot of people I can converse with because most of my friends are either in relationships, still married. Um, and I find I do a lot of the activities here. I love the arts and crafts, which is similar to kindergarten, but I love it. I've learned to crochet, which I never did. I Tai Chi, I do that. I find that what interests me, I do. I go on trips when they have ones that interest me. I come up here when I want. I don't have to if I don't. And being here has probably also changed my life considerably because I have a social life here. But don't you know, I needed my two sisters to come in here the first time with me because I was too nervous to come in by myself.
I
Honest to
do, I do find that that's probably one of the most surprising things you said during this whole interview, because I do not see you having any fear whatsoever.
Yeah, I did. And once they came in and we met some of the people here, then I started coming in by myself. Absolutely. As odd as that sounds. And so far, so good. This weekend, my sisters and I are going to Cancun for a week. I mean, my life is very different than it could have been. Very, very different. And you have to listen to inside and say, go for it.
Go for it. Life
Go
is
for
so
it.
short. There are two
Yeah.
things that the research out there in order for us to stay young, and one is to keep our mind engaged and the other is to keep our body active, right? Those are the two things. That's what atrophies. That's what really, because I know old people who chronologically are not old, right? But they've disengaged from their life, or they're not physically active, and you've got to keep engaged in life, because I don't want to stop being engaged until I stop breathing, and it's people like you that keep me so inspired that there's never a shortage of opportunity and experiences. And I just love, how old are you?
78.
78 years old, and you are still so fully engaged in your life, and it's amazing, and it's a true inspiration. All
Thank
right.
you.
I always end with two questions. So I'm going to ask you the last two questions. But before I do, is there anything that you would like to say to our listeners? Any advice, anything at all you'd like to say that I haven't asked?
No, not really, but I do feel that if you've got just this little bit of strength, when you come to certain situations, just close your eyes and step ahead. It if it doesn't work that time, it will work another time. If you've got it in you, do it.
I love that. Thank you. All right, last two questions. What does self-love mean to you?
Self-love. I don't know. It can be a lot of things. Self-love can be physical. Self-love can be where you're at in life. Self-love can be what you've accomplished. For me, I think it's what I've accomplished. It's since that young age of 22 when I got married. Yes. I can't believe
Okay.
it myself sometimes.
Okay, and then finish this sentence for me. Hope is. What is hope? What does it mean to you?
Hope is being almost sure that you can accomplish whatever it is you want to accomplish. And then once you do accomplish it, then you've succeeded in that hope.
That's beautiful. And I want to thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your story, for
You're
being an
very,
inspiration to me and the rest of our listeners. I know that there are people that really need to hear what you had to say today. I always trust that. I want to thank my listeners for tuning in. I love you guys, and we'll see you all here next week. Bye for now.